In 1919, he hit 29 home runs and was sold to the New York Yankees.
A three-run home run for Buffington. The Yankees now lead it by a score of 3-2.
Bill Lee is now going over to a couple of the Yankees, and there they go again.
One hits it to deep left. That might send the Yankees to the World Series.
Varitek and A-Rod going at it. Roberts is going. Posada's throw. Roberts safe.
What can I say? Just tip my hat and call the Yankees my daddies.
Welcome to Fanbase, a deep dive into the greatest rivalry in sports in episode 105. It may be, I feel like it's kind of the most, we've had a lot of good ones and a lot of great guests, but this one really special for us. John Senecal, Brian Shackman here. Fred Lynn, I mean, you can talk about all his all-star appearances and his time in Detroit or in California with the Angels, but, you know, obviously for me and so many people, he's a Boston Red Sox for life, and he joins us now. Mr. Lynn, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
I just want to know, are you getting any sponsorship money from Johnny Walker or what?
Well, you know what? The thing's taken on a life of its own, it seems like. It was kind of a joke at the beginning, but, you know, if it makes people put a smile on their face, then what the heck?
Yeah, you're getting a lot of traction. You got two mostly new knees.
Yeah, that's right. I've got two partials, and I'm doing pretty well, to be honest with you. I make sure everybody knows these are partials, not full replacements. So if you're going to do these kinds of surgeries, I don't know if you do two full new replacements at one time. I've heard that being done, but the partial deal, being an athlete who's worked out for 40 years, you know, the PT, it's just something I've been doing forever. Seems like it's just a different workout. It's with my knees now instead of something else. But it's going pretty well. I'm walking around. I can do just about everything, just not full speed yet. So I'm looking forward to getting out on the golf course and testing these babies out to see if they can shoot 68.
Well, that'd be. Can you shoot your age?
You know, the interesting thing is, as bad as my knees have been, probably 5 or 6 weeks ago, I shot 69. It was right before my birthday. So I beat my age by 2, and I hadn't done that, well, ever. And it was the first time I ever played a round of golf with no bogeys. So
That's incredible.
It's in there. It's in there. I just have to drag it out.
Wait, you can watch his progress in recovery from his surgeries at 19 Fred Lynn on Twitter, which is where I got it. It's how we connected. You know, I want to, you know, this podcast, for history's sake, started in the pandemic. John is a huge Yankee fan. I'm a huge Red Sox fan. And we just did it to pass the time. And then when I joined, you know, formerly Entercom Odyssey, they picked up the podcast, and it's been off to the races. But it started as a Yankees Red Sox podcast, but really we do baseball in general. But for you, people, I didn't know this, and you were drafted by the New York Yankees, and you decided not to sign, and you went on to win 3 World Series with USC. And I guess where I'd like to start is that, you know, take us back to then, why you said no, and whether it was hard to say no to the Yankees.
Oh, well, I have to go back a little bit further. When I was 16, I played on a team sponsored by the New York Yankees. We were the Pasadena Yankees, and it's a suburb of L.A. It's right where the Rose Bowl is, and our stadium that we play baseball is adjacent to where the Rose Bowl is located. And this team, we wore old Yankee uniforms. I had Moose Scowen's uni, by the way, when I was 16 years old. It had Scowen stitched in the back of the neck. So Roy White played on this team, by the way. So the Yankees knew about me when I was 16 years old. This was a Sunday league, and you played against guys that were in college or minor league guys. So when I was 16, I played against guys who were in the mid-20s or older. But it was, like I say, sponsored by the Yankees. So when it comes down to draft time as an 18-year-old, the Yankees drafted me, I think it was in the 3rd round, but we had told everybody that I was going to school. I went to USC to play football and baseball. And so we really didn't think too much of the draft. I mean, I was going to school. We told everybody. There were a lot of teams that were interested in me in the 1st round, either as a pitcher or as a hitter. So when the Yankees drafted me anyway, it was just kind of like a shock. And I remember when the scout came to my house, and it was just my dad and I. And he says, well, I'm so-and-so, representing the New York Yankees. We'd like to offer you this. And my dad says, we told you guys, my son's going to school. And you just, you're wasting your time. And the guy goes, well, we're the New York Yankees. And my dad goes, well, there's the door. So we didn't sign. And, I was going to go to school, so it was no surprise to me. I guess it was a surprise to them, though.
When the decision to go to school, was that something that was, more of a moral, like society kind of thing, or was that something like that your parents instilled into you that you had to get an education? What was the process behind that?
It was a big deal. I was the first person to go to a major university in my family. I think some of my distant relatives have maybe gone to JCs or something, but it was a big deal to go to school. And I was primed for this since I was in kindergarten. You're going to get an education, and that comes first. Sports comes second. Now, I used my athletic ability to get to the major universities via football, and that's what afforded me a scholarship to go to USC and a lot of other schools. But I was going to go to school. That was, and back then they weren't giving you a lot of money to sign anyway. So, the college education was paramount. And that's the major decision or major reason why I went to USC.
Now, growing up, I mean, you say you're groomed for this. Now, you're obviously a sports fan. Are you a Yankees fan growing up, a baseball fan in general, or what was your team growing up?
Or was it just football?
I grew up in the L.A. suburbs, and so the Rams played at the Coliseum where the Trojans play. I used to go to Trojan football games. I'd go to a couple of Ram games, and then, when I was a kid or younger, say high school, the Trojans were football and UCLA was basketball, and we had the best of both right in the same city. And I was recruited to go to UCLA too, and but I watched basketball. I played basketball in school as well, but I love sports. I was not a Dodger guy. I was a Giants fan. The Dodgers were good. They had Koufax and Drysdale, and they won a lot of 1-0 games. But the Giants had Mays and Marshall and Cepeda. And they hit, so they were more fun for me to watch, and I just became a Giant fan as a kid. But I was a sports fan in general. I followed all sports, and I followed the local teams. And then, so when USC was interested in me to play football, and like I said, been to the Coliseum many times, I said, well, this is pretty cool. I could play where I used to come in and watch. So that's another reason why I went to USC.
It's interesting that you brought up the fact that the Yankees sponsored a team. They still do that. It's called the Hanks Yanks. And here in Connecticut, my kids play amateur youth baseball, and they play against that team. So they're still doing that as part of the tradition with the Yankees. After you go through USC and you flash forward and you get drafted by the Red Sox, and then you wind up in a part of our country here where we are talking now, and that's Connecticut. And you wind up in Bristol, Connecticut. And I'm sure you loved Bristol, Connecticut, right?
It was pretty small. When I signed, I didn't sign till, like mid-July. The draft was in early June, but I played on a U.S. team, an all-star team, collegiate all-star team against the Japanese all-stars. They came to the States, and we played at Dodger Stadium and Angel Stadium. And I asked the Red Sox if I could do it because I had done it previously, went to Japan as a sophomore and played against their all-stars in Japan. So I had international experience. So the Red Sox said, sure, go ahead. So when I get to Bristol, the season's half over, at least half over. And everybody already has roommates and the places to stay. I have none of that. The team was on the road when I joined them in Sherbrooke, Canada. Don't even ask me where that is. It's in Canada. So I get back to, I'm up there for a few days and come back home to Bristol, and I'm trying to find a place to stay. And fortunately, I knew one of a USA team guys, Andy Merchant. He said, well, you can come stay with us at this little cottage on Cedar Lake. So they already had, it was a 2-bedroom place. So I stayed on a porch, a little lanai, like a lounge chair. That was my bed. So it was an interesting start to professional baseball for me. Muzzy Field, that's where
Yeah.
Bristol Field is. That's a great little ballpark.
Still play there
Still
today.
there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my son plays there.
Yeah, super little ballpark. Great trees in the background. Good hitters background. Real short to right and long to left.
I get
so
blown
they-
away
the
by
fact
you
that-
guys. I get blown away. You've been there in probably, 50 years, and you still know the nuance. I bet in golf, too, you're like, yeah, my second shot on the fifth. Like that recall. You baseball guys are incredible with that.
Well, it made an impression. This is my first stadium as a pro, basically, and so I'm checking it out, and I said, "Wow, this is pretty cool." Because I was a dead pull hitter then anyway. I said, "Geez, just get the ball in the air here." And then Jimmy, he had to hit bombs to go to the left.
Right.
So I had, and in that league, I wasn't in it very long, about a month and a half. Everywhere we played, it was all the stadiums were very similar. It was short and right and long and left. So it was advantageous to be a left-handed hitter in the Eastern League in those days. So, but Buzzy Field was a cool little place. We didn't draw flies. We're a terrible team. The team was mired in last place when I got there, and I sure didn't help them advance. But then Jimmy and I got called up at the end of our season to AAA. And we helped them win the AAA World Series. So it was a kind of a cool start. Got my feet wet in AA, and then went right away to AAA and won the AAA World Series.
Yeah.
So that was a good start.
We're talking with Fred Lynn, and just incredible. I'd love to talk to you for 2 hours, but we don't want to do that to you on this day. But, if you're not familiar, 9-time All-Star, we think sort of the only true Rookie of the Year MVP. I mean, Ichiro's amazing, Hall of Famer, but he was well far advanced in his career when he came to the United States, and 4-time Gold Glover here on the Fan Base Podcast, John Senecal, Brian Shackman here. I think we really need to fast forward to not just 75, but I think from like 75 to 80. Like the thing in revisiting your career, Fred, was that the seasons you had, I mean, especially 79, statistically even better. And I mean, Don Baylor, if you want to go by WAR, I mean, Don Baylor didn't have half the season you had in 79, and he won the MVP. And, we've had a great time poring over your numbers. And I guess the best way to start, when talking about that era, I guess I want to ask, because everyone knows the 75 series, and that's your rookie year. But I want to start with Red Sox Yankees. When you came up in 75 and were having the season, did Red Sox Yankees matter back then?
Oh yeah, it mattered. I really didn't feel the rivalry in New York, and only because they were playing at Shea. And really, Mets fans aren't Yankee fans. So imagine a sprinkling of Met fans got into Shea to watch the Yankees play, because if you remember correctly, they were refurbishing Yankee Stadium. So my first year, we didn't play in Yankee Stadium. We played in Shea. So I didn't really feel like they had a home field advantage, to be honest. Now I felt it when they came to our place, because our place was crazy nuts. Red Sox, and they hated the Yankees, and I could really feel the energy. But I never felt the negative energy of playing in Shea. That probably helped us out in '75. Then until when they got back to their real place, then I felt it. Then it was like, okay, game on. This is what it's supposed to be like. You get 55,000 people who really don't like you. So it was intense, but I was used to it a little bit because I had SC UCLA and SC Stanford. So those rivalries were intense and long-standing, just like this one. But what mattered the most was that both teams are in the same division, just a few miles apart, basically, geographically, and both teams were really good. And the rivalry is only as good as when the teams are both good.
That's right.
If one of them was, dominating the other, then who cares? But when they're both good and both fighting for the same thing, then it's intense.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of dislike between the two teams, and it really started at catcher. Fisk and Munson.
Yeah.
Two Type A personalities playing the same position. Oh, who's better? And geez. It kind of started there, the way I saw it, from the outside looking in. And then both cities, were thoroughly engaged and not liking each other.
I want to ask you, I mean, I'd like to go to the Big Red Machine stuff, and you can chime in on whether you thought, your first year there, that was just the way it was going to always be. But, I mean, since we were limited on time, I think about the seasons, especially, we all know about 78 and Bucky Dent and all that. You won 99 games. In 77, you won 97. Both years second place. But if you played that season in 2023, you'd be in the playoffs. And so when you look back at those years, do you think that if you had that opportunity to get in the way they get in now, that those could have been World Series teams?
Well, yeah, there's no question. The way the playoff system is now, all those teams in the 70s would have made it.
Yeah.
But, the teams, everybody remembers the 78 team won 99 games. To me, we were better in 77. Now, what people forget, except for me, is that I tore ligaments in my left ankle in spring training and missed the first 27 games of the season in 77. So we won 97 anyway. So I kind of think that if I'd have been in there for those 27 games, I might have made a difference, maybe climbed up 2 or 3 more games. I'd like to think that would have been the case. So, that 77 team was loaded. We beat the heck out of people. We'd go on these big winning streaks, but, we go on some losing streaks, but we still won 97. It's just that back then, it was the Yankees and Baltimore and the Red Sox. All 3 teams were really, really good. It just wasn't one team. There were 3 teams. Really, you had the best 3 teams in the American League all in the same division. So, yeah, man, it was rugged, and no question about it.
Fred, you had mentioned about, at the beginning of the season missing time for being injured with their ligament, and you said you only missed like 27 games. Was that something you did in spring training, and you just did that going into the season?
Yeah, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I went to where Braden, the Pirates. In those days, you had to bring, when you went on the road, you had to bring some quote-unquote star players. Well, Zim brought me along, and I pinch hit, and I got a hit. Jeez. Got on second base. Somebody did a soft liner to left, and I went back to second, and their field was like concrete. It used to dry out. And I went back into second, and my spike caught, and my ligament just popped. You could hear it all throughout the stands. And so they just slapped me in a cast that night for 2 months. And so that was a huge, and I was crushing it in the spring. So that was tough, because even though I came back, there was no rehab. I literally flew to Seattle and played. Took BP and played. That was it. So since it was my back leg, my calf and my hammy, my quad, they all atrophied about an inch smaller. And so as the season wore on, I remember digging in and my leg would shake because I'd lost muscle. And so I wasn't the same player that I was in spring training. And so that, that's, you win 97 games, and if I'm healthy, we win 105 probably.
Well, it's crazy because you're talking about, basically you're coming back from a huge injury that, when I first asked the question, I'm saying this guy's out for a month with torn ligaments in his ankle. I'm thinking a normal player nowadays is out 6 months with that, at least 4 months probably.
Well, at least they would have some PT. They would make sure that your muscles weren't atrophying in a cast.
Yeah.
They would do things differently. They didn't have any of that then. So you were immobile for 2 months.
Yeah.
Cast them off, go play.
Now, given the time, nowadays players got all sorts of, nutritionists and dietitians and all trainers and all that. But how often in your career were you playing through injury? I'm not talking about this kind of injury where you literally couldn't play. I'm talking about, the strained quad and that, and you just didn't say it and you just kept going. Where some of these guys, they sneeze and they're out for a month now.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences between now and then, but the ownership, because they're paying these guys a lot of money, they'll make sure that they're 100% when they come back in. When I had an issue or an injury, I always came back too soon. 100% of the time came back too soon. I just couldn't stand just sitting there not doing anything, let my team down, my city down, all that stuff weighs heavily on you. So I always came back too soon, and you're always fighting through something. And there were days, even months, where nothing's wrong. Well, that's when I tear them up. I'm kind of I don't want to call it natural, but I never really thought about like hitting. I thought about, how I was going to approach a certain pitcher, but I didn't really think about mechanics and things like that. I could do it. So when I'm healthy, I just let it fly. And I don't really think about it a lot. I just react to what I'm doing. And I was very successful doing that. So when you're injured, you get a chink in the machinery, then you start thinking, okay, how am I going to make up for that? And you start trying to do things that you don't normally do. And so, unfortunately, I had to do that a lot, especially the second half of my career. But, that's just, as a pro, back then, that's the way you did it.
You talked about not letting your team down, and you look at your career over 17 years. You had basically half of that pretty much with the Red Sox, and you're a Red Sox Hall of Famer. Do you consider yourself always in your heart and in your soul a Red Sox and part of the New England fabric of baseball?
Yeah, I sure do. They gave me my start. They drafted me. They brought me up. And the cool thing about coming up with the Sox in those days is the relationships that you made with the guys you came up with. Jimmy Rice and I go back to Double-A together. So we're friends today. In the youth of that 75 team, we had, we had 5 or 6 guys under the age of 25, and we're starting. I mean, that's unheard of in today's world, too, especially on a pennant contending team in a town that wants to win. So it was so much fun to be with those guys and have the relationships that I have now with all those guys, with Dewey and Louie and Rooster, all the guys that I came up with. I'm still friends with today. So, yeah, when I signed with the Sox, I thought I'd be a Red Sox forever. That's just the way I thought.
We're talking with Fred Lynn, the great Fred Lynn here on Fanbase, the deep dive into the greatest rivalry in sports. We only have a couple of minutes left here. And before, I know John wants to ask you some of your thoughts on the modern athlete, but you just touched on it, like Lynn, Fisk, Rice, Evans. I mean, even Yaz, was not as young as you guys. You still had Carl Yastrzemski, and you had this run from the mid 70s to I don't know, you can even say to 80 if you want to, and you never won it. And I'm just curious. And I think you belong in the Hall of Fame beyond just the Red Sox Hall of Fame. But talk about that, looking back. I mean, you played until 1990. I mean, you had an incredible career, just incredible. But not having that World Series, especially with the Red Sox, I just want your thoughts on that hole.
Yeah, it's a big one. There were opportunities to get it done, and we just came up short for various reasons. In '78 with the Bucky Dent thing, and then in '75, Jimmy Rice doesn't play in the World Series. That's huge. And then even in '82, when I was with the Angels, we lost when I thought we should have won. Having had the success I did as an amateur at USC and winning national championships 3 for 3, and then winning the AAA World Series, I was used to winning. I was used to going to championship games and winning them, not losing them for any reason. So, yeah, there's a big hole in my career as far as I'm concerned. We didn't get it done. We played well. We had really good teams. But when it comes down to a one-game scenario, anything can happen. And unfortunately for us, we didn't catch the breaks that we needed. But the Yankees were really, really good. So you got to tip the cap to those guys because they were equally as good. And don't forget Baltimore because they were right there too. So, yeah, I still think about that stuff. I'll wake up at night and say, don't throw that pitch. Geez. Or things like that. Yeah, it would have been just wonderful to win, but I enjoyed winning. I don't like losing. I enjoyed all the wins that we had with the club and all the good times, and it was a blast to play 70s baseball with the Sox.
Fred, Brian mentioned about the Hall of Fame, and of course, when you mention your name, it can't not mention the Hall of Fame because the numbers are there. And you look at the players in the last 20 years that are going into the Hall of Fame, and you look at their numbers, and obviously they're skewed with the PEDs, and you can talk about the Clemens, the Bonds, the McGuires, the Sosas, and those guys. But then you'll also hear people say that, every era had something. Every era, there was the greenies. And, I had talked to Keith Hernandez at a charity event once in the media room, and he was talking about how he smoked a full pack of cigarettes in the 86 Game 6 against the Astros. And some would argue that may give you an edge on the field or in at bat with a nicotine rush. But, that aside, I would love to hear your take on players getting into the Hall of Fame when we're talking about the numbers being there, but there's whispers or there's evidence that there was cheating, because like I said, people say that there's cheating all throughout baseball in every generation.
Well, yeah, you're always going to try to get an edge. In my day, you mentioned greenies or amphetamines. That's guys would even take diet pills. I remember hearing that. But what's the difference between that and having espresso coffee? Probably not much. But as far as the Hall of Fame is concerned and the different eras that you play in, yeah, they're vastly different. They're vastly different. 70s baseball doesn't look like anything like today, for sure, even in the 80s. The ballparks, the ball itself, the way pitchers pitch, everything's different. So you're going to make the Hall from your time, not from any time before or after, because you can't really compare generations. Numbers, I never was a numbers guy. All I cared about was the number on the left side of the column, wins.
Yeah.
That was my number. Do everything you could do that particular day to help your team get a W. That's it.
Yeah.
There is no more. And if I could do well to do that, great. And if I couldn't hit, maybe I'd make a play in the field. Find a way to win the game. That's it as a pro. Well, anyway, that's how I thought, even as an amateur. But awards and things like that, I had plenty of them. That was never a goal.
Yeah.
It was never a goal. Never anything that I ever thought about. I can remember playing with guys in the big leagues, and we'll be up 10-1, and say, well, get me out of here. Let's get somebody else in there. We get some guys off the bench, get in there, get some game time experience here. And I heard one guy said, nah, I might hit a homer in the 8th inning. I said, what, the game's over? Yeah, but he's looking down the road.
Arbitration and the such.
Yeah, they're looking down the road for stats, and they all count. Yeah. I never thought of that. But, at the end of your career, that 8th inning meaningless homer, it's a homer. Yeah. So, I just wasn't wired like that. So I'm very happy with the way I played and the effort I put out every day that I came out. And like I said, my goal is to win. And so when we didn't, I was hurt more than anybody else.
When you watched the game, do you still follow baseball today? Do you watch it on TV?
I do. It's a little harder to watch. Maybe it'll be easier this year when there's not 7 guys in one side of the field. But, to be honest about that shift thing, another topic, the onus was on the hitter. I mean, if I had 6 guys looking at me on the right side, I'm not hitting it over there. I
don't understand, Fred. Why? I know the macho thing. I mean, the macho thing in baseball's got out of hand. But I don't care. Why not just bunt and keep them honest? Why can't the market forces just take care of itself?
Yeah, because you have some people running the game that actually never had a bat in their hand. So that's one of the reasons that happened. But the hitter's got to look over there and say, well, I can remember. This is how it used to be. If middle infielders, they see the catcher put down the sign, say it's a breaking ball. Well, right before the pitch is thrown, they might slide over a couple steps. And as a hitter, if you saw them do that, number one, you knew what the pitch was. And number two, you might hit it where they weren't. So these are things that we knew about that today's hitters don't even think about. If I didn't have anybody at short and third, I'd hit 500 until you put the guys back where they belong.
So why don't the guys do it then?
I don't know. I don't know. It must be the analytics say that if 9 guys go up there and try to hit a home run, we might hit 4 home runs and win the game.
Yeah. I mean, do you even? Let's face it. I mean, for me, I think it's we always dress the way we think we were in life when we were the coolest, and we dress that way when we're older. We always look back on the phase of the game where we loved it the most, right? And so for me, it's the early '80s and then the early aughts, because I met my wife and we went to tons of games in '04 and '05, and just the Red Sox were so fun and it was so intense and it was so real. And I'm just curious. I mean, is you said it's hard to watch. I mean, what about the culture of it, from the bat flips to just home runs or bust? I mean, does it bother you, or are you okay with it?
Well, if you ask a guy like Bob Gibson or Don Drysdale if anybody ever flipped a bat when they were pitching.
Right. You get it right in the teeth.
There'll be no, if you did that, okay, the pitcher might not even wait for you to come back up there. The next guy up was going to go down. So as a teammate of somebody who did that, who showed up the pitcher or the other team, and then they throw it at my noggin and say, hey, to my teammate, knock that off. Right. You're going to get me killed. So, yeah, we policed our own back then. So, like I say, it's a different animal, and these guys, to be honest, that's the way they've been taught. So they might not necessarily know the difference. It's incumbent upon my guys of my generation to, if they're coaching, to say, hey, listen, there's another way to do this. Don't preach to them like you're preaching to the choir. You just show them. Say, listen, there's another avenue for you here. Try this, or see if it works for you. But if you say, do this, do that, I don't know if they'll listen.
Fred, you mentioned Bob Gibson and Don Drysdale, and I feel like Bob Gibson's like the benchmark when don't piss this guy off on the mound. Did you have that one pitcher that you faced that you saw him penciled in, you're like, oh, man, this is not going to be a good day? I mean, for a 283 lifetime hitter, there wasn't many guys that had your number. But was there a guy up there?
Frank Tanana was my kryptonite when he was with the Angels with Nolan Ryan.
Really?
You got traded for Frank Tanana.
Yeah, that's right.
He is your kryptonite.
It was Nolan Ryan was number one in strikeouts, and Frankie was number two. This is before he hurt his arm. He threw probably mid-90s, and he had 4 pitches, okay, not just 2 like Noli. And he threw kind of across his body as a lefty. He was tall, so he was really, really hard to pick up, and he had good control. So the reason why he was so successful after he hurt his arm, because he already knew how to pitch. So when I went out there, I think in '75, he struck out 17 of us. I struck out 3 times. I didn't foul one off. Huh. And I'm having a pretty good year. And we're a pretty good team. So, yeah, he was my guy that I was like, oh, okay, let's see if we can make contact here.
Yeah, I mean, John's asked you the greatest question, because I think it's the anecdotes from your playing days that are just the people don't get to access that, we like to bring to people. And I'm just curious about, this will be the last question, just, talk about maybe, your favorite place to play, or, the I don't know, like.
Did you have a favorite fishing spot in New England?
Yeah, or something. Just give us some underbelly that, people be like, man, I did not know that.
Well, here's the deal. Playing in Boston in the 70s, remember, they hadn't won for a while, right? So every game was life or death. And you need an outlet, something you can do to just get away from the game for a bit, just to decompress, because there's a lot of media attention. And that's okay, but you just need to decompress. So for me, it was fishing. And so I lived in various spots around the ballpark. And I would just go out, and I would look for low areas, because that's where the water is, and I'd park my car, and I'd fish these ponds. To me, they were ponds. Well, some of them were reservoirs. You're not supposed to fish, apparently. But I would find my way in there, and I'm a bass fisherman, and I caught a lot of bass, and I'd let them go. But that was a way for me to just go out by myself, just be with nature. I'm the only person out there, unless the Mounties came or somebody. Some woman would say, "Hey, somebody's fishing in my pond," and that happened once. By the way, I come out, and the guys, two cops are waiting for me, and they recognized me, and I said, I'm just, fishing here, and is there a problem? And then they say, well, this gal over here says, don't, you're not supposed to fish here. Here, go park down about 3 blocks that way, and no one will see you. So I said, great. But that's how I dealt with the pressure of the situation. I just went out, and I went fishing by myself, and then I was ready to go to the park.
It's like Ted Williams. My dad is a big fisherman. He wrote Ted Williams a letter once, and about fishing, not about baseball. And Ted typed up a letter, wrote him back. I mean, there's something about the common thread of fishing. I think it connects people in a way that's I don't understand, but it definitely is a bond that's different. Fred, listen, we'd love the chance to access you down the road, but we're so appreciative. And because of social media, I mean, I guess it must be really fun for you to recreate with the to reconnect with the masses, because it's so much easier than it was 20 years ago, and you can have this social media presence where everyone can see and interact with you.
Yeah, it's fun when you're playing, especially in my day. I try to sign autographs at the ballpark, but that was difficult because the little kids would get crushed by the mass of people, and I say, okay. But you try to react with them as much as you can, but you're kind of pigeonholed a little bit. And it's nice to be able to reach out and have interaction, a positive way, with the fans, and I love to hear what they have to say, because it's good feedback for me, especially when they like the defensive stuff, because I always consider myself a defender before a hitter, and so that makes me feel good when people appreciate my style of play. Kind of reckless, but they love that stuff, and so it's nice to hear those stories, and I try to communicate back as best I can with them, and just to be positive about it and put a smile on their face, and that's what I try to do.
Well, thank you for your time. It's been awesome.
Yeah, you can't ask.
Well, thanks very much, guys, and maybe we'll do it again during the season.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, talk about a great perspective about an amazing career in baseball. That I hate to say it, a lot of people really would not remember him unless they're Red Sox fans. Really, just a great baseball player and fascinating individual. I mean, like you said, amazing athlete.
He went to USC to play football and not necessarily baseball, and won 3 national championships in baseball.
And he could probably be on the senior tour, PGA, like the senior tour.
Seriously, and he's got 2 new knees, mostly new knees. What a great half an hour. It's just so much fun. You've been listening to Fanbase, a deep dive into the greatest rivalry in sports.